There's really just too many injuries to count at this point at wide receiver and at quarterback. And we're still dealing with some uncertainties here, but we're going to do our best to get through it and walk through every matchup to find the must-start and sit receivers for Week 11. And I'm one of the only fantasy YouTubers working on a Saturday to get you this kind of content, so make sure to go down there, drop a like on the video, subscribe to the channel to show your support. Now getting into our first matchup, we've got another awesome overseas game that we love to get up for, Washington at Miami. Yeah, this one's going to be pretty gross, people. I mean, I think I already said this week. Miami, out of their element, is not a good offense. This is out of their element. I know it's in a dome, but it's overseas, and that's just not a good equation for an offense that's too inconsistent. That being said, I think Jalen Waddle is clearly the best option in this matchup, and he's done mostly well outside of the one game that they played in Cleveland. I mean, Jalen Waddle is their one and only pass catcher at this point, so you've got to play him. He's guaranteed 14 points basically in a full PPR format. I mean, he is really, really steady, and I think has a 25-point ceiling against the bad defense. Deebo Samuel, second best option in this matchup at receiver, but he's pretty low in my rankings. Everybody who knows has a premium subscription at fsroundup.com. You know where he's ranked. I don't view him that highly. I mean, last week he got in the end zone, but he still is averaging at best 40 receiving yards a game. It just doesn't have the upside there without Jaden Daniels. And that's just the bottom line, end of story. So Deebo Samuel, mid-tier flex play. Same thing with Jalen Lane. He's much worse than Deebo Samuel because Deebo is the only consistent playmaker. But get this. They used Treylon Burks last week. Yeah, the guy from Tennessee. He gets injured. So Robbie Chosen is actually going to be playing a good amount in this game. I'm not going to play him. I'll play Jalen Lane between the two of them. But this is a lower-end flex option that's really only a couple spots ranked above Malik Washington. Malik Washington continues to be low-ranked in my rankings because he doesn't have much upside down the field. So yes, low-end flex option, but that's about all you're going to get. You've got Jalen Waddle for sure. Deebo Samuel maybe, and then the rest of it is deep shots to take it. If you want a potential touchdown play, I think they could both give you that, but nothing much more than that. The Green Bay Packers at the Giants, much more fun matchup to talk about here. This one's interesting. Green Bay's line on this game, I find it a little odd considering how bad they played offensively and Jameis Winston being a part of this matchup. I think there's fireworks. I like Wan'Dale Robinson much better than the Green Bay options. Wouldn't say much better, actually. I think he's a good guy to play and was on the border of being a must-start player now that Darius Slayton is out. And that's a huge reason we wait until Saturdays to do these videos is because we get that kind of news on late Friday or early Saturday. We had that drop yesterday. So we know that Wan'Dale is going to be the main guy there. And I don't really know who's going to be available outside of that in the Giants wide receiver room. So I think a lot of targets are going to go to Wan'Dale. So I would play him over Watson. And I'd still play Watson over Dobbs, who got cleared this week too. My thing with Watson is look at how the offense is running right now. Outside of a couple deeper plays to Watson, what has really worked for this Green Bay offense? Not much. So Romeo Dobbs to me he's a fine flex play. He's in my top 30 range. But Christian Watson is not that much, it's not that much different to me. I mean, I'd rather take the shot on a couple big plays from Watson against the Giants secondary than I would rather take the shot on Romeo Dobbs being really consistent with this offense because it just hasn't worked what he's been doing lately. So I think he's flexible, but I'd rather play Watson. And then Dontavian Wicks, I also think is flexible as well just because of necessity. They need to have players playing, and he will get some opportunities. Last thing they want to do is throw that Bo Melton back out there because he's a cornerback converted wide receiver. It's just not going to work. I do think that Dontavian Wicks is slightly playable in this game. And I will mention Jalen Hyatt. I'm going to bench him, but I do think he's probably the second best option in New York without Darius Slayton this week. The Houston Texans at the Tennessee Titans. This one's another one of those nasty ones. Nico Collins is very similar to Jalen Waddle. Definitely a must-start player, and I think just a better player in general than Jalen Waddle. But, of course, we just kind of wonder what the game script is going to look like here. Feels like a run-heavy game against a Tennessee offense that can't keep up. So Nico probably needs to hit his ceiling pretty early, but I do think the matchup really works really well. And there's no chance I'm putting Nico Collins with what he did last week with Davis Mills on the bench after that week. And then Calvin Ridley may be coming back. As of the time of this filming, we don't know what is going to happen there. But if he plays, he's right there with Chimere DK. I think they're both playable guys, but they're both mid-tier options. Cam Moore just hasn't been good. I mean, we just have to accept that. Like, no, he doesn't have support around him, but it doesn't change the fact he hasn't been good. Point blank, end of story. So I do think that needs to be discussed, right? Because I think a lot of people may be excited about having Calvin Ridley back because he's got the big name and everything. The reality is, even if he's still a good player, it doesn't really matter because his quarterback isn't very good himself. So neither one of these guys are high upside plays. They probably get you a floor of about 5 points or something like that if they are the number one option, but there is not much room to split in this Tennessee receiver room. And then I'm going to go ahead and say Jaden Higgins is probably just a couple spots below those two guys, only because of the fact that Tennessee, they need a wide receiver one, and also Jaden Higgins has not been consistent. It's been very bad what his consistency has been. So I don't trust it. I do like the direction. Houston wants to make him their wide receiver too. It's just a matter of if they can trust him on a weekly basis or not. He may be a player on the rise. Make sure to keep your eyes on Jaden Higgins. But because of that, I'm not going to say that he's like a must play right now or even a good flex because I still don't trust the guy. But then Christian Kirk, Jalen Noel, I don't trust them either. Right now, it looks like Jaden Higgins is the guy they want to be their wide receiver too, and they're kind of making that happen as we speak. And then, of course, Elick Amaner is irrelevant in this offense now. The Carolina Panthers at the Atlanta Falcons, and Drake London is questionable. We don't know if he's going to go. If he does go, of course we want him. I mean, you're going to play Drake London if he's out there. And I don't know if he's going to play or not, so make sure to stay tuned throughout the rest of the day, throughout the next 16 hours or so, if he ends up playing, because it will be a crucial factor for most lineups. Because you're going to play him if he plays, obviously. But then outside of that, the flex options in this game, pretty much garbage, man. I mean, I think that you could, in theory, play. Obviously, you're going to play Ted McMillan a lot of the time. Like, Ted McMillan is the high-end flex here. But I think with the backup receiver options, Leggett and Darnell Mooney, Mooney is in flexible territory because of the London injury. If London was fully healthy, I would go ahead and bench Darnell Mooney 100% of the time. But I think that there can be an argument made if he's not there that Mooney could be a better play than Leggett. My whole thing is Leggett is a bigger play guy. He can have weeks where he gets you 20 points. You just don't know when. Very Keon Coleman-esque of him. So neither of them are good flex options, but I do think they're both viable as flex options. The Chicago Bears at the Minnesota Vikings. We've got two must-start receivers here with Justin Jefferson and Rome Odunze being the two. Now, I'm curious to put this one to a poll on FSRoundup.com because I want to know how many people would play Rome over JJ. Because there's a lot of frustration that's been building with JJ, and I've been kind of at the forefront of this, saying Justin Jefferson's upside just isn't very high. The reason I like him still is because his floor's been really steady. Like, he's not crushing you. He's just not uplifting your team to where he would usually do with a Sam Darnold at quarterback or a Kirk Cousins at quarterback. He's not able to do that with J.J. McCarthy because J.J.'s trash. So you do just have to factor in your ceiling is probably around 17 points, but your floor he'll hit pretty consistently of about 10 to 12 to maybe 14 points. And Rome is kind of a firecracker. The guy is all over the place. He has 30-point upside, I believe. I don't love the matchup this time, though. So I kind of am fading him a little bit this week. He was right on the border of must-start territory. But to me, he still is their wide receiver one on a more consistent basis. So I would say that he's a must-start. And then DJ Moore, I think, is also a really good, solid flex start as well. He does have upside. And outside of last week, where he was kind of in and out of that game with injury, he is a guy that has a relatively stable floor of about 8 points in a full PPR format. We just know that he hasn't hit his ceiling that much this year. But I would try it over Jordan Addison. I mean, Addison is just a really good player with a bad quarterback. I mean, it's similar to Justin Jefferson. It's just the difference is JJ demands like 12 targets a game. And Jordan Addison, as a result, only gets about 4 targets a game. So the likelihood he hits on a big play with a quarterback that's that bad is just lower. So I would say he's a mid-tier flex option if you need a big upside play. Addison is definitely worth it, but I would play DJ Moore in the consistency over Jordan Addison most of the time. And then Olamide Zaccheaus, I do think a lot of people don't like it, but he is very flexible. He is definitely a mid-tier flex option because he's always involved on a weekly basis. He's actually, I think, one of their leading receivers. Like, he's been very involved. So I do think that he's definitely playable. But I want to go back to these two receivers here, Justin Jefferson and Rome Odunze. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start a poll on our site, and I want you to vote on it because it's completely free to vote. So I'm going to line up Justin Jefferson, go to chat, then go to start a poll for week 11, and then line up with Rome Odunze. And I want you to vote on this one honestly. Tell me what your thoughts are, because I want to see how many people go with Rome Odunze here. So go vote on it, completely free to vote, and it's also completely free to start your own poll and get live feedback and results from the rest of the community on what you should be doing. And if you want access to my weekly top 250 rankings, 280 this week, as a matter of fact. If you want access to the automatic waiver tool, which processes your waivers automatically after priority claims run through, the comparison feature and league sync-up feature, that is with the premium subscription. But if you want the ultimate personalized team breakdown from me, you can go ahead and do that, and I'll give you trade ideas, waiver ideas, how we can make your team win a chip this year as well. Now our next matchup, the Los Angeles Chargers at the Jacksonville Jaguars. Ladd McConkey, definitely a must start to me. He's completely separated from the other Chargers receivers, and we've got another QJ injury. Quentin Johnston is questionable as of the time of this filming, and we've got real no indication of whether or not he's going to go or not. So we'll have to keep our eye on this one. If he plays, and if Brian Thomas Jr. plays, who's also questionable, and we don't know, I would rather take QJ. He's on a better offense. His chemistry with Herbert is better. I'd rather take that shot because he's hit ceiling games way more than BTJ has this year. BTJ, if he plays, yes, I'd rather play him than Jacoby Myers because of big play upside, but I don't think that he's that great of a play. Like, I think he's a higher end flex option, and we know the player he is can hit big weeks, but it hasn't happened much this year. It's just been a bad year for him. So I'd rather play QJ over BTJ. And then Jacoby Myers, again, even if Brian Thomas Jr. plays, definitely flexible. You can play him as a mid-tier flex option. But if he doesn't play, then Jacoby Myers is the second best behind QJ. And then Keenan Allen, you could also play him probably over Parker Washington, who I think has just a higher ceiling than Parker Washington. The only reason Parker Washington had a really good game in fantasy last week is because he had a special teams punt return touchdown. That's not going to happen every week. So you could definitely play Keenan over Parker Washington. But the bottom line is everybody basically is playable in this game. The Tampa Bay Bucs at the Buffalo Bills. Emeka Egbuka, fire him up. The guy's a wide receiver one. Deal with it. Khalil Shakir, the best option outside of that. And I know that I think the problem with Khalil Shakir that people have is the ceiling games aren't really there that much. But this week, it's going to be different, I think. No Dalton Kincaid definitely changed that offense. You can't trust Keon Coleman to put together 2 straight games that are really good. So Khalil Shakir, just by default, is the wide receiver one in Buffalo this week. He's going to do pretty well against the Bucs secondary, I think. And if the weather plays a part, that's fine because Josh Allen can play through that weather. And then with the, situation like Tez Johnson, I'd rather play him over Keon Coleman 100% of the time because his efficiency with Baker has been pretty spot on. Now, the only problem, again, is the weather could get nasty in this one, apparently. So I don't love Tampa options as much, but Baker still has a strong enough arm to make it happen. So I do think that even in this weather, I'd rather play with Tez Johnson than I would rather play with Keon. But Keon is flexible, and I would go ahead and sit everybody else, including Sterling Shepard. The Cincinnati Bengals at the Pittsburgh Steelers. Jamar Chase, fire him up. Off the bye week with Joe Flacco, who is expected to play. And you just don't overthink it. The Steelers' defense sucks. T. Higgins, as a result, is a better play than DK. I mean, DK's chemistry with Rodgers is so bad. It is so horrifically bad that you just don't want to overthink this one. You play the higher upside wide receiver, who to me right now is T. Higgins. You just play that because T. Higgins against the Steelers defense, I think there's plenty of upside there for T. Higgins to have a really big game. And yes, there is upside here for DK, which is why he's still a high-end play against the Bengals defense. But at the same time, Aaron Rodgers and him, again, just not on the same page. So maybe they put up 30 points with DK Metcalf having like 50 or 60 yards on 3 catches. and no touchdown. That's possible too. So I'd rather just play T. Higgins in this game over DK, but they're both very close to each other in my rankings, and they're both high upside plays. And that's kind of it in the wide receiver room. Roman Wilson's still not consistent enough for me. I definitely think he's a better player than Calvin Austin, but they still like to use Calvin Austin. So I would say both of them are just sits. Andre Yeshivas, maybe if you want a deep play, is probably the best option, but I do still think I'm going to bench him in most formats here. The San Francisco 49ers at the Arizona Cardinals is our next matchup. No must starts in here, but Ricky Pearsall is immediately the best option. Like most of the time, here's the deal. If you have Ricky Pearsall on your team, you're probably pretty desperate to have a good flex play, and he is a high upside play. Like every game he's played in this year, including the end of last year, very good player. So I would say that you can reluctantly put him back in your lineup because, again, there's that re-injury risk, and Brock Purdy has the same thing, but it is a matchup that you could take advantage of, and Ricky Pearsall has been very good. So I'll take Ricky over Michael Wilson. Because Michael Wilson, my thing with him is that I think the primary beneficiary of no Marvin this week is probably just going to end up being Trey McBride, who gets targeted into oblivion. I mean, Michael Wilson has been a fine player to play, but he's just not that good. So yes, I could definitely see him being a higher upside flex play this week with no Marvin, but I would rather play Ricky over Michael Wilson. But I played Michael Wilson slightly over Jennings because Jennings, his ceiling is minimal. We know what he is, and I do think that Michael Wilson, on the other hand, we don't know what this guy is by himself. He could have a 25-point game in him. So I'd rather take the shot on that over a player we just know what he is. And then Greg Dortch has to be flexible only because what if it is him? What if he gets 10 targets and Michael Wilson gets 5 or 6? Very possible, but either way, this matchup is very good as well against a Swiss cheese San Francisco defense. The Seattle Seahawks at the Los Angeles Rams, our next matchup, best for wide receivers easily. JSN, fire him up. Puka, fire him up. Devontae Adams, if he plays, easily fire him up. This is not even a question that you should really decide on because Devontae Adams, there was a quote that he said on Friday basically saying, like, I'm going to play, but it's just a matter of what I can do realistically. And I think that's his way of saying maybe I'm just a red zone target this game. Either way, you want to play Devontae Adams because he could easily have 2 touchdowns in this game against the Seahawks defense, which is great. But Matt Stafford playing at an MVP level and his chemistry with Devontae in the red zone is pretty sweet. So you play Devontae Adams if the guy plays. He's been too good to sit. Rashid Shaheed, I would say the best option outside of those 3 guys is Rashid Shaheed. But will say this, not been big on Kupp at all this year. This is a revenge game. I like revenge games. Stephon Diggs against the Bills, that was a good result. Cooper Kupp against the Rams, this one might have juice. Be careful with Cooper Kupp. If you're playing against him, maybe go for an upside play. If you have him, I might shoot him in there over a guy like Michael Wilson, to be honest with you, if I want a really big upside play. The Kansas City Chiefs at the Denver Broncos. Rashee Rice, fire the guy back up off a bye week. I don't care what the matchup looks like. And this one's tough, but I'm doing it anyways. Troy Franklin, better option than Sutton. And I think Sutton's a fine option. I really do. And here's the thing. The quarterback is not good enough for me to trust on either of these guys, especially against the Kansas City defense off of a bye week. That is not a team you want to play out of a bye week, but it is in Denver. Home field advantage there is a real thing, and I do think Sutton has just not the same chemistry that Franklin does with Bo Nix. That's just the fact of what we've seen over the last month. So Franklin, to me, better option. Both of them are higher end upside plays that I would play over Worthy. Worthy is clearly hurt to me. This has been a lost season for him because he's not been healthy since the start of the year. I mean, that's really the reality of this one. It's okay to play him as a floor play, like he's going to get you 8 to 10 points, but the reality is, man, his ceiling is pretty much non-existent at this point. Marquise Brown, maybe you could play him if you want an upside play. Probably would go against it since this is a tougher matchup, so I'll put him on the bench. And then Marvin Mims Jr. coming off the injury return, I'll go ahead and bench him too. The Baltimore Ravens at the Cleveland Browns. No must starts. Zay Flowers, clearly best option. And here's the thing. I kind of had a debate in my head earlier today of like, why is Justin Jefferson a must start when his floor has basically been the same as Zay's, but Zay has a higher ceiling? And the simple fact is, it's kind of hypocritical of me to do that, but I'm going to continue to do it because we know that Zay won't hit his ceiling as much as JJ will. So JJ, his frequency of hitting 17 points is way more frequent than Zay hitting a ceiling of 25. Either way, Zay Flowers is a very solid play against this one, even in a tougher matchup. And then I would say D-Hop without Rashad Bateman is a solid flex play if you want a big play. Like, I do think it's very viable to play D-Hop in this game against the Browns. They could have a deep shot, could go his way because his hand size with the rain, it doesn't even matter. And it's going to be a nasty game. It doesn't even matter. Like, his hands, dude, he's got some freaking mitts. You can play DeAndre Hopkins if you want a big play threat. Jerry Jeudy, if you want to do it and just make yourself miserable, knock yourself out. But the bottom line is, in a bad weather game with this quarterback, I'm not going to want to play Jerry Jeudy very much. He's at the bottom of the barrel for me as far as flex options. I'd play Hopkins easily over Jerry Jeudy. Cedric Tillman, I'll bench him. Tylan Wallace, I think, is the name that you should know outside of DeAndre Hopkins. No Rashad Bateman. Tylan Wallace has had 6 targets this year. He's had effectiveness down the field. Tez Walker as well, you could throw into that group. But for me, I'd rather play Tylan Wallace as the deep shot if I took one. Detroit Lions at the Philadelphia Eagles. Sunday Night Football should be a really good one. Amon-Ra St. Brown, fire him up. And Devonta Smith, at this point, I'm ready to commit. I think he's just a clearly better option in fantasy than A.J. Brown is. And I'd actually play J-Mo over A.J. Brown as well for 2 reasons. Number 1, Dan Campbell took over play calling last week. How'd that go for J-Mo? Pretty sweet. Pretty freaking sweet. Wide receiver 1 on the week. He loves J-Mo. Dan Campbell loves J-Mo. They just signed him to the big deal. And the reality was John Morton just didn't do very well utilizing him. That's why they made the switch ultimately. So Dan Campbell calling the plays, I like J-Mo more. And number 2 is because Sam Laporta is out this week, meaning that there probably is more viability for a wide receiver 2 in Detroit than in most weeks. So J-Mo is clearly in every format, I think, a better play than A.J. Brown. A.J. Brown is fine to play if you want a big play. He's one of the better big boom plays that you could make, but that's what he is. That's what he is at this point. And we can call it sad, we can call it depressing because he was a 2nd round pick. But the bottom line is that's our reality. And we have to get used to it because it's never going to be consistent as long as he's a Philadelphia Eagle. This team and him are just not vibing. And so if I can avoid it, I'd rather not play him. And Devonta Smith, to me, is clearly the best option in Philly. Dallas Cowboys at the Las Vegas Raiders. Monday Night Football. Start both Dallas options. George Pickens, CeeDee Lamb, fire them both up. Trey Tucker is still my preferred option, and this is a good matchup. So I do think there's a lot of playability in this game. But I will tell you this. Tyler Lockett, keep an eye on this guy. Favorite of Geno Smith. Favorite of Pete Carroll. And he's been good. Like, he has been involved in this offense on a weekly basis. So I do think that they both have playability against a really bad defense. And I'll be honest with you, Trey Tucker is definitely the better flex option to me if we want an upside play. But if you want a floor play, Tyler Lockett actually might be the way to go. So let me know what your wide receiver room looks like in Week 11. And if you want to see this week's full top 30 wide receiver rankings, click on this video right here.